So Kate and I are changing tact with the podcast a little bit. We are trying not to ask the question, where are we, who are we with, to start the podcast, and trying to pull these podcasts into a more natural space for the makers. But now we've got to know you, James.
We're here.
James, who are we with and where are we?
So I'm James Elliott, a chainsaw wood sculptor based in Hamilton, and these guys have kindly came over to see how I do my stuff and have a chat about what chainsaw carving is.
Oh aye, don't forget that. And for anyone watching on YouTube and not listening on Spotify, Kate,
You got a free owl out of it.
I got I got to carve a free owl, which was awesome. So
It's awesome.
this is the kind of work James does. This is the small version that he taught me how to do. And yeah, hope you enjoy the podcast, guys. Thanks for following along. Tree surgeon first, right?
Yeah.
Is that how you got into it? So were you always a tree surgeon? Like left school, be a tree surgeon?
No, so actually I left school, worked in a factory immediately after, and that was around the time of the first financial crash. So got made redundant. What?
Squeaky, squeaky.
Squeaky,
No, I'm rolling downhill.
All right.
I'm talking to you, I'm like slowly rolling.
Aye, we're on a slight camber here. Aye, so that was around the time of the first financial crash. So I wasn't getting another job in a hurry, wasn't getting a trade, and I thought, I'll go to college. And I'd always wanted to study illustration. And obviously, you get fees paid here for doing such things. So capitalised on that and ended up doing digital art at university. And at the time I was really into that, digital painting, working in Photoshop, that kind of thing. But as time went on, I was like, I don't play computer games. So realistically, what I was going to be getting into would be film. Right. But to get into film, you have to do the computer games too. And I'm like, I don't play them, so they're not going to want me. And I was a bit like, change of direction time, do you know?
Yeah.
And I always enjoyed...
So was it like concept art you were doing at first?
Basically, aye. That's exactly it, really. Concept art. I did a few commissions for... like the Commonwealth Games were on at the time. Right, I did a kind of poster for a place then. But it's... Just the way kind of times changed, I ended up going down the route of wanting to kind of... I don't know, I can't even remember how I got into wood carving. I think I'd seen pictures of it online and kind of got into knife carving.
Right,
and then from knife carving I was like, this is cool. When you say
knife carving, you mean like spoons and stuff, using the knife to...
Yeah, just using knives. I did a little owl with a Dremel, and I really enjoyed the process of it. I was like, I'll never make money doing this, do you know?
It's a long, drawn-out process. Like, we know a couple of folk that are really good, like Cornish woodsmith. I think a few of them that are like really shit-hot spoon carvers and stuff, but it's a lot of time to make one spoon. And it warrants a lot of money, which it does warrant a lot of money because they're really good at it, and I would absolutely pay it.
It's the kind of thing that it's a hobby for a long time before it becomes, any kind of career or anything monetised.
Find your own sort of unique, stamp,
Yeah. So I was, I'd done my degree, and I was kind of needing to supplement the bills, obviously, while I was kind of working on a portfolio, things like that. So I started working as a tree surgeon, and I actually really enjoyed that, and to the point where I was almost like, could I make a career out of just this, do you know? I was really enjoying that, and Jimmy, who owned the company, he was a ex-sergeant major in the military, so he was a really motivating guy to work for. Really drilled in a good hard work ethic, and a couple of the guys that I worked with, were at the same kind of point as I was at. They're really wanting to kind of think about their future and where they could push themselves to better themselves. So it was a really good environment to be in, do you know? And then a few of them kind of heard that I was good at drawing, and that I'd made a thing of that in the past, and I kind of thought, right, they were like, you need to try chainsaw carving. Right. So I had a go at carving.
Had you heard about chainsaw carving before?
I'd never really heard about it, no. Right. They kind of put the ideas in my head, so I kind of went for it. The first thing I carved, they were totally blown away by, but I was like, this doesn't look like anything. Do you know? It was like a faceless owl. It was.
They could see the potential.
They could see the potential. I think they thought it was amazing.
Your inner critic though is saying this looks like a tatty with wings.
Yeah.
Right?
I couldn't see anything in it, to be fair. But anyway, that kind of turned into me staying back and carving after work every night, you know.
Oh, wow.
And then it became every weekend as well. And before you know it, you've got a shed full of stuff. And Jimmy, obviously, being the way he was like, you need to get a Facebook page made. You need to be selling that stuff. And I was like, you know what, aye. And before you know it, you've picked up commissions. Dogs are really popular. So one of the first things that I started doing from a commercial standpoint were dogs, you know, pet portraits for people. And that enabled me to start doing
pet stuff sells, eh?
Oh yeah, everyone loves
wild.
their pets.
Yeah.
So
it's pets are anything to do with dogs in particular. People love their dogs. When their dogs are, you know, nearing their end days, they want to memorialise them in some way. It's a really big part of kind of culture now, I'm finding, for an art maker. It's really important.
That memorialise thing's interesting, eh? Because that is the big thing about wood carving. Like, they are big standalone units that will stand there for a long time.
Yeah,
like a long time.
I think the big draw with certainly chainsaw wood carving is with a chainsaw you can do it large scale very easily. You can do that as quickly as, you know, someone with a power tool would do a small carving. So there's a big draw in that you can do it cost effectively for the client, but also it's got that impact that someone will walk into their garden, see that and be like, wow, that's a statement piece.
Big statement piece, yeah. Talking point.
And I mean, people associate kind of large detailed sculptures with like the marble stuff that you'll see in museums, so it's something quite out there, quite unusual in the modern world, you know.
That's a good point there, isn't it? It would be the marble and the big stone carvings from like Greek times. That's what you'd associate. That's like the closest museum-ready piece, right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly in Glasgow, you know, you go to Kelvin Grove Museum, you see these huge, big marble sculptures that came from all over the world at the time of the Empire, and that's what you associate these large sculptures with. You don't think that that's something you can buy and just put in your garden, do you know?
What is it? The thinking man is it the thinking man? It's the Greek sculpture. I'm sure it's in
I know what you mean.
It's on night at the museum. It's in the Smithsonian, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
That's like the sort of iconic big sculpture. And you're like, you couldn't ever have that in your garden. But it turns out actually you can if you know
actually
someone.
can if you got a big log.
If you've got a big log and someone with a chainsaw, you
can. Give me a call.
That's wicked. So at what point did you jump from tree surgery to doing this full time?
So, I mean, I'd started doing it as a hobby for maybe a year, and obviously having a bit of art background enabled me to I knew the design process, so I was able to think, right, I want to do this, so I'll do some sketches, see how that looks, and then for me the difficulty was the technical stuff. I didn't know how to do things efficiently, do you know? Like, that was something I had to learn as I went, but the artistic side of things, obviously, I'd been versed at because I'd done drawing most of my life, do you know? So that's still, to this day, takes me a bit of time. Did you get any tuition on that, or is it just trial by fire? No, it was totally trial by fire to start with. Obviously, there's an online community of other carvers, and once you start to, you know, look on Facebook, on Instagram for other guys doing it, you find a community, and there is a really good community in carving. And I was lucky to kind of make friends with some other carvers in the south of Scotland, in the south of England, the north of Scotland, and you start rhyming ideas off each other, do you know? And it's
so
a great
helpful
way to
when you're on
improve.
your own.
Yeah. And the nature of carving is it's all guys like myself, you know, middle of nowhere. You're not going to like a community group and doing it, so having that online community is vital, do you know? It's really important. That can be quite isolating. Yeah. If you didn't have that. Yeah. It's you spend a lot of time in your own head when you're carving. I think you do when you're doing any form of making. Right. You you spend a lot of time in your own head dealing with your own thoughts as you're doing it, but that's a therapeutic process in itself, really. Do you know?
Even with a two-stroke screaming at you.
Exactly. Well, that increases the thoughts.
You try and think louder.
Yeah.
Has that been something that's been quite difficult, to sit in your own head and sit in your own time? Because these aren't like a couple hours a day, chip it out. These are long periods of time.
They're some people that say when they're creating artwork, they get a piece from everything that's in their head, or they get a stillness.
Right.
I mean, I've got to say I'm completely the opposite. Everything's screaming at me when I'm working on something like that, And certainly, any maker is plagued with like, what would you call it, imposter syndrome, where they feel like it's not good enough, or they haven't done this right, so they're constantly analysing, double checking what they've done, and I think that's the biggest obstacle to overcome, certainly if you're doing detail work.
Right.
Is knowing what's enough, what's good enough, and being able to check out of your own opinion and just having a look at that from a calm standpoint, do you know?
Like, this is good enough.
Yeah.
How do you check out your own opinion?
I usually have to, what I call the fresh eyes method, so start working on something else until you almost forget about it, and then look back and be like, actually that's not that bad, do you know? And
You've just been here for so long.
yeah, you've just, like, certainly for myself, I'll hyperfixate on something that I think's wrong, and it's not until I walk away and come back that I'm like, it's not actually that wrong, it's just I've looked at it for too long, do you know?
Yeah.
So
Why do you think that is?
I think it burns a hole in your head almost, do you know? It's, you want to find you're that desperate to look for a solution for it that you kind of negate the fact that there is something inherently all right with it as it is, do you know? So it kind of takes a little bit of time to figure that out, as a maker, when you're looking at a piece like that and you think, well, it's more my opinion of it that's getting in the way than is actually something wrong with it, do you know?
Yes, totally hear that.
But then at the same time, you want to improve what you're working on. Yeah. So you do constantly want to be flaw picking, but just not to the extreme, I guess.
Very, very, very fine line though, isn't it?
It is.
What you notice is not what someone else is going to notice.
Exactly.
That's the hard part, isn't it?
I mean, I'll look at another carver's work and see no flaws, but they'll be like, oh no, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And it's not until you see that yourself that you're like, that's what I'm like.
Yeah.
Do you know? And that's the beauty of these, like the shows that we do, where you've got 5 or 6 carvers all carving, is that you see the way they are with their sculptures and you're like, that's what I'm like with mine, so maybe I'm not that bad and maybe this isn't that bad, you know? And that's a great thing about community. Not a lot of makers don't get that. You know, they don't get together and make together.
Very unusual, really.
Yeah.
You know, because, you could be other side of the world, really,
Exactly.
And these shows we're talking about, they're typically the agricultural type show, the driven show, the Highland show,
I mean, we have there's a circuit in England called the Living Heritage kind of craft shows. And it's mostly like a game fair craft show that's at different kind of points throughout England. I think they do, it's mostly England, some in Wales as well. And they'll have like a competition circuit. So we'll come and we'll do like a 25-hour piece or a 16-hour piece.
Oh, okay.
And then you get judged in a number of criteria. And there's an option to do kind of speed carves throughout the day, which are 30-minute carves, so very strict timing.
A competition style event.
Yeah, based around art making, which obviously gets you working faster, gets you working more efficiently, and gets you thinking more about what you do need, what you don't need, your time management, and also what it gets you to see other carvers' techniques, what they're using to push forward. So it's a really helpful thing to have, really.
Yeah.
It's certainly helped me evolve as an artist a lot, being able to get involved in them. Certainly in Scotland, we've got one carve Car Bridge up in Car Bridge in the Highlands.
Yeah,
And that's a 4-hour speed carving, chainsaw only speed carving competition.
When's
We'll need to go to that.
And that's it's the first week of September.
Don't know where we
First
are,
week of
first week of
September.
December. That'd be cool.
That would be cool.
It's
Love up
it's
that
unique, pretty unique in the carving world in that it's a 4-hour chainsaw only competition. So no power tools, no sanding. It's just like exactly what you can do with just the saw.
All right, okay. Single tool job, one saw, one bar, one chain.
Yeah, which is a kind of throwback to how chainsaw carving started. You know,
Right.
it was like foresters and loggers just killing time in their lunch break or at the end of the day.
Right,
you know?
okay.
So it's technically difficult to do.
Good challenge, though, eh?
It is. It just really shows you what you can do with
The basics.
the basics, which is what chainsaw carving's all about.
Aye.
It's about doing something as little as possible.
Just put yourself out there as well. It's not always easy to do.
No,
Put
exactly.
yourself in those positions.
Yeah. Is that what's attractive about chainsaw carving to you? It is about doing, because it is, with very few tools, taking a lump of wood
Yeah.
to something beautiful like what's sat next to us and in front of us.
I think what you guys will probably noticed is for woodworkers in particular, you need a lot of machinery to do a lot of the stuff.
Aye.
You know, like furniture making. There's a lot of very specific machines that you need to get the end results that look good or look sellable. With chainsaw carving, it's a couple of chainsaws, a couple of basic power tools. Yeah, there's a lot of specialist bits you can get, but you'll usually find you only need 1 or 2 of them.
Yep.
Do you know? And it's other than that, it's purely your own study of the subject, your own desire for a specific finish, and a bit of space to do it in. Do you know?
Yeah, right.
And you don't need a heated workshop, unless you're in Scotland, of course, in winter.
You'd love one, but you don't need
Yeah, you'd love one, but you don't have one. But it's, you can create something that's sellable quickly. You know, you could do it at a roadside, you could do it at a lay-by if you wanted. There are guys that do that in England where it's easier to do that. And yeah, it's just very grassroots. You don't need a lot to do it. You just need some good timber and a chainsaw and a bit of willpower.
Yeah.
You can see how it's something that's come from, like you say, loggers on their lunch, to, oh, I want to do a wee bit more of that tonight. Oh, I want to do a bit of that at the weekend.
Yeah.
Oh wait, someone wants to buy that. Oh wait, someone wants to buy that for more than I'm making on a week on a logging firm.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's a really, really progressive curve that's going on there, and all of a sudden you've gone from a logger to an artist, which is exactly what your curve's been, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's, you know, like any kind of labour job, you're working for a day rate, and when you're carving, you start to realise that like you can produce X amount of stuff within that time, and then you're like, hold on a minute, I could make that work for a day rate, and then before you know it, you start to build up orders, you start to build up a backlog, and then you're like, I can do this. There is a market for this, you know, it's doable. And that's a powerful feeling to have in a world where we're kind of forced down very specific avenues for careers and for futures and things
They
like
don't
that.
teach this at school.
No. I mean, that's the thing in in a lot of countries in Europe, I think wood carving's taught in schools in some form. It might be part of like a technical education class or whatever, but they do show you it's part of culture, whereas in the UK for some reason it isn't. But it's so enjoyable to do. It's certainly, it's been a life-changing thing for me to be able to do it, do you know?
So what do you really need that's different from your everyday chainsaw?
So,
because you could, I mean, there's going to be a world where you get, I know there's carved specific bars for the chainsaw, but you could start with a chainsaw. Like if you were cutting a tree down, you often see, you know, you're on forest walks and stuff, you often see they've cut like a mushroom in the top where they've felled a tree. That surely is just the chainsaw they've used to do it.
You can do a lot with just the standard bar, and one proponent for that is actually a carver, like a very experienced and one of the first actually in the UK, Pete Bowsher, based down in the Borders. And he was a forester and one of the first to use standard bars to do deers and things like that. It was amazing what he could do with just a standard bar. And this was long before carving bars, etc. were brought out.
Aye.
And what they basically enable you to do is get more detailed lines, like pencil lines. So you'll see, like, for example, if I was cutting the outline of this bear out, you could do a lot of that with a standard bar, but when it comes to refining these shapes, getting these kind of full texture lines, it's a lot easier to use a carving bar to do that than it would a standard chainsaw, which is a lot of kickback risk. And also...
Aye, because you're nosing in, right? Yeah. That you're not coming in like a normal cut, are you? You're nosing in a lot of the time to get that.
It's the it's the dexterity of a carving bar that puts it above a standard chainsaw. But you can do a lot of that with a chainsaw with practice. It's just you've got to be very careful of the zone that you're in, or else you will get kicked back, and it's dangerous. Do you know? Yeah. Let alone messing up the piece itself.
Yeah. Is there anywhere that teaches it though?
Not really. It
feels like with the safety concern that there maybe should be like some form of formal training in it.
Yeah, well this is the...
Just don't be stupid.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's kind of, you're using a chainsaw out with its intended purpose.
Aye.
So it's quite hard to ensure teaching that.
Right.
Because it's not necessarily a manufacturer's intended purpose for the saw. It is safe enough to do, and in fact probably more safe because you're not as tired as you would be if you're like bucking up logs in the forest, for example. But certainly from an insurance standpoint, without craft insurance, it's very hard to do that, and to teach someone that's not doing it every day or doesn't necessarily have experience with a chainsaw, that starts to become quite a difficult thing to do.
It feels like there could be a lot of real fundamental mistakes you could make safety-wise early on if you didn't have your prior knowledge of working with chainsaws. Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't like to take a total novice with a chainsaw and try and teach them like how to do a big cut, how to do one of these, difficult plunge cuts that you're going, like, say, in between there, because you really need to know how to do a plunge cut in the first case, because the kickback zone of the saw isn't full effect there, and it could come flying back at you, and you don't want that, do you know? No. So that's something that can be a bit of a setback, certainly for people wanting to get into it, do you know? And it certainly put me off, even though I was working as a tree surgeon, learning how to use a saw. I started carving, I think I was maybe 6 months into working as a tree surgeon. So I did start at roughly the same time.
Right, okay.
But I was very nervous cutting. I would take way too long to do a cut because I was like, I do not want to risk this hurting myself or, making an idiot of myself.
That's a dangerous
I think that's all right. Like, I think it's all right to take a bit longer and not lose an arm. Yeah. It's okay. We can give permission for that.
It's you see videos of guys online that'll just like zip, 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 and that's all muscle memory after doing it for years and years. But when you start off, you're like, oh no, I can do this, and then you're like,
in slow-mo.
Slowly.
Yeah. But slow and steady, right?
That's it.
Means you've still got all your fingers.
Yeah, exactly. I think. I'm checking.
They're getting shorter weirdly, but
they're definitely getting shorter, but they're still there. I've actually never had any accidents, and I think that comes down to never being complacent, never thinking, oh, that'll be fine. You're always a little bit more careful than you need to be, and I think that's an essential modality to have with anything working with woodworking machinery. Do
you think there's an amount of it that's... Because working with woodworking and machinery, and certainly in the timber trade, you obviously don't get complacent, professionals don't get complacent, but you are still doing the same process time and time and time again.
Yeah.
It feels like the art aspect of this forces you to just slow it down a peg, because you can't just rush into it and just batter through it. I mean, arguably yes in the roughing out stage, but every single thing that's in your shop here that we're looking at, for the collie to the bear to the big part sculpture we'll talk about in a minute, like, they're all different. So it gives you almost the permission to just rein it back a bit, it feels.
Yeah, I think I think that certainly the analytical nature that comes with any form of making crafts kind of stuff, it does slow it down. You're not bashing out like a robot would, do you know?
Aye.
Certainly if you go down more of a production route where you're carving the same thing in the same design over and over again, it's a bit more like that. But then there is still a limiting factor in that you can only cut as fast as your brain's working. So, you know, you're not going to, it's not like charging about with a football necessarily, do you know, where you're at risk of falling over and injuring your leg, and you're a bit more, everything's a bit more kind of premeditated, do you know? Which is, a bit different.
And does it fulfil the art need that you wanted to fill early on? You know, when we started this conversation, it was very clear that somewhere there was the artist inside you. Is that now fulfilled?
In a way. I mean, it's being a professional artist or using it as your primary source of income. Of course, there is a sacrifice. You have to make ends meet. And in doing that, you limit the time you would for doing the pieces you want to do.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm kind of now at a point where I'm trying to free up a bit more time to do the stuff that I want to do that speaks for what I'm doing again. Because it is very easy to just get totally torn away by commission to cover the bills because you don't want to run out of work.
Of course.
So certainly for the art side of things, it's
always good to have that project just sitting in the background and like if I need to step away from something.
Yeah, that you can chip into, certainly.
Is that something you're conscious of, making sure you have that project?
I'm guilty of not doing that. I'm trying to get better at it because you do, like, I try and put a little bit of what I want to do in every project. So if I'm doing a dog, which after doing 10, you might be like, oh God, another dog. But if you think, right, facial expression, let's try and get that facial expression better than I've ever done that before. That's your way of pulling in your own story into what you're making, do you know?
Yeah. Joe talked about this. Joe makes needle felt tends to be dogs. She does animals and everyone's pet, but she talked about this because she does dog after dog after dog, but they're all different dogs, and each of the dogs has her interpretation. And like you say there, like it's a chance to be like, I want to concentrate on the face of this dog or the something or
the customer's employing you to do it, so they want your skills and you're like, what are you gonna do to this dog that, you know, that's why I'm paying you.
I mean, there's ways you could look at it. You could do it just a dog, as simple as a dog could be, just sitting rigid straight. Or say you've got a particular passion for trying to pull out the emotion of something in what you're doing. Like for me, certainly, I like getting a really accurate face. I come from a kind of portrait drawing background, so that's really something that I enjoy doing, and it's something that I can put into every dog portrait that I can do. In a way that's quite unique, do you know?
Yeah.
So I try to put that in a different spin in every dog order that I do. And I think for any artist, no matter what you're doing, that's a very important thing to do. Is find something that you enjoy about the things that might end up becoming mundane. I'm not saying doing dogs is mundane. I love doing them, but it's certainly important to find your own voice in something that's quite common like that, do you know?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, finding your own voice and everything, isn't it? Because, like you've already talked about in this podcast, there's so many other sculptors out there, wood chainsaw sculptures. It's like, or carvers. Would you call yourself a sculptor or a carver? Where would you categorise yourself?
This is actually quite a hot topic. There's people that don't think you should call yourself a sculptor because you're carving wood, you know, it's not modelling like clay. But I find...
I'd say it was still sculpture.
Yeah. In a traditional sense, it is sculpting. And certainly the way that I work, I'm not just doing a flat carved cut. I'm nibbling away with the nose of the bar, I'm rounding out shapes. So I see that as sculpting, just with a carving tool. So I would say a sculptor, yeah.
What would you say, Kate, for sculptor v carver? What would your definition be?
I don't know, but I definitely think it was sculpture.
I've always viewed carving is like something reductive from a flat surface. Like that would be me. Like if you were carving a face into this, I'd be like, that's been carved.
Yeah.
If something's freestanding itself, I would always, and I don't know why, but I would always think that's a sculpted piece, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a different thing.
I'd say so.
Oh, so you would say that like a relief carving, like like if you're relieving that wood away from the subject that it's going to be at the end, you would deem that as carving as opposed to sculpting?
I don't know, I think only if it was on a flat surface. Like if it was like a wall hanging,
yeah,
I think I'd be like, that's a carving. Like I would introduce it as a carving. I've never really thought about this, so we're doing this live.
Interesting, aye.
If it was like something hanging on a wall, I think I'd be more inclined to call that a carving.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's something big freestanding, I'd be definitely more inclined to call that a sculpture. Because you never really think about a sculpture hanging on the wall, a sculpture hanging on the wall, do you?
No, that's true. Aye, that's true. There's definitely a difference in that. Like freestanding, you would never call that. I don't know. I would call that a carving. I have seen stuff freestanding I would call a carving, but certainly on a wall, you wouldn't say a wall sculpture, you would say a wall carving.
Aye.
It's quite interesting. I've never thought about that in that sense.
I'm trying to work this out live right now, so...
That's what it's all about, isn't it? Discussions.
We've found something here.
Aye.
We've found something.
Aye, right, scrap the rest of the podcast. We're going to work this out. No, but you're absolutely right, aren't you? You wouldn't think... Okay, tuck in just so I don't come in front of you.
You're fine.
You wouldn't think... I think sculpture's freestanding. I'm going to stick with that. Sculpture's freestanding. But then again, I wouldn't say freestanding isn't a carving.
Be here all day.
Yeah. This is interesting. I think I'm going to keep that now. Freestanding is sculpture, and wall hanging would be a carving.
I think so, but I wouldn't say freestanding's not a carving.
Aye.
That takes more thought. Be interesting to hear feedback on that.
I think this is something that needs to go to a poll.
Yeah.
Aye, this needs to go to a poll.
This needs to go to a poll.
Right. So, everybody that's listening to this
Maker's
right
definitions.
Yeah.
That's a book in the future, eh? Definitions. Like the Bible.
So you've grown quite a big social media following. Like what's taken?
Yeah, so, I mean, when I started out, I was absolutely terrible for marketing myself. You know, I'd put pictures up, but I wouldn't really put a lot of thought into it. If I was getting an order, that was more than enough for me. So these things are, the battery's going. That was more than enough for me. So I didn't really put much thought into it until a couple of years down the line, you start seeing other guys and you're like, they've got a really refined social media kind of portfolio and personality. I guess your nature is to improve and get better at that. And then before you know it, you've got a post going viral. I was really lucky that I had a couple of posts that went viral and got my name out across the world and to other bakers and obviously to a wider buying audience as well. And that's amazing. It gives you a sense of comfort that you've got this work coming in from that, and it gets more people seeing your work, and it builds your confidence as well as a person, do you know? And it's good to have that as a maker when you spend a lot of time on your own, do you know? Yeah.
Did it translate to work well?
It does,
Does
yeah.
it?
I mean, like, certainly over lockdown, a lot of makers were panicking like mad. So certainly myself, I stepped up my social media game. I was like putting everything out, posting everything I could, being as regular as I could with posts. And before you know it, you've got a backlog that just extended for a couple of years. And I'm like, how do I get through all this? Do you know?
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
So you're just filming everything?
Now I film pretty much everything I can. Unless I'm in a really big rush to get something done and I'm like, I can't sit back and change the camera angle, can't do this, then I will film everything I can.
Well done.
And even if I don't have time to edit it straight away,
have it there.
I've got it there. Yeah. And I'm trying to commit to posting every day at the moment. So I'm reusing old content and trying to make it look like a new video.
But this is what we talk about. It's like repurposing content, because probably half your followers haven't even seen that the first time.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
there's no problem with that. And I did have a problem with that, because I was like, I don't want to repost old content because they've already seen it.
With this, and we kind of ruminated over it. And my argument for reposting old content: how many times have you seen an advert on TV that's the same advert?
Yep.
Running for... You don't spend that much money and time. Like, big productions will spend a lot of money. We'll, as smaller people, we'll spend a lot of time. You don't spend all of that to throw it at the wall once and hope it sticks. Throw it a couple of times.
Yeah. It's certainly, to start with, that held me back a lot. I would put something out and then I'd be like, oh, nobody wants to see that again. And you personalise the customer too much. Like, even someone that's followed you from day one probably doesn't look at your page that much. They'll like your post, but they're not going to notice if you repost something. That's not going to change their interaction with it. No. Unless it's like you posted the same sculpture every day for like a week. That might be different.
But even then, they might only see it twice.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good thing, especially in the way someone's feed is now. There's so much stuff going through it all the time that so I try to repurpose my content and convey a different message with it. Have a bit of fun with it. Use
it being fun. Like, don't just see it as like, I'll have to do it, because like, why not make it fun?
Like, even collaging different projects together to create almost like a fun little story. Things like that. Like, you can have a second creative outlet just making your content.
You can.
You know what I mean? It's great fun.
That's good you enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's you've got to. You
don't see it as much as a chore.
No. I mean, there's times you get home and you're like, oh, there's a million things I'd rather do than making a bit of marketing content. But at the end of the day, it gets work coming in. Do you know what I mean?
And who else is going to do it?
Yeah, exactly. You could pay an arm and a leg to get someone to do all your social media content for you, or you can do it yourself and garner a bit of interest for free, time-free. But
it's a hard argument, isn't it? Because yes, you absolutely could pay someone to do it, and I do think if you can't do it and you're in a financial position to pay someone, that is a good spend.
Oh, absolutely.
But you don't. It may be better performing content, but it won't be as authentically you content. It's not what's been going through your head while you've been sculpting. Like, unless that person is also a shit-hot sculptor, I would argue they can't put together as good sculpting content. They can probably put together better content for the algorithm. Yeah. But whether it's really good sculpting content is a different thing.
I think, certainly for myself, you have a very specific angle of the sculpture that's the beauty spot. That's the angle you first envisioned when you were thinking about it, or that you've put the most detail into. Yep. And someone else is never going to know that. They're going to see it from their point of view. So I almost feel that you'll get the best content from that angle that you've came up with yourself. Do you know? And yeah, if you were getting someone else to collate a video, they're not necessarily going to see that or be able to translate that in the way that you can and tell the story in the way that you can. Do you know?
I agree entirely. That's
definitely an important thing. I always try and tell a story with my content. I don't make it just an advert of the sculpture. I try and get creative kind of camera angle movements coming up, and try and get it to, I don't know, sync up in a specific way or whatever each time, and it does make it have a little bit more impact.
Oh yeah.
Well, it must work because you've got a very prominent account.
Aye, it's definitely, people seem to have resonated a lot with certainly the German Shepherd content that I've put out. Aye. That was the thing that really blew up and brought a lot of people in, and I'm very grateful for that. It's great to have so many people kind of joining me on the journey, but it definitely adds a different aspect to the business and a different thing to be creative with, and it wasn't something that I set out to do originally either. Do you know?
Yeah.
No.
And what about these bigger pieces? Like, we're sitting in front of a piece you're doing for Lanarkshire Council?
North Lanarkshire Council,
Council. Is that a result of the social media stuff, or how do you go out and get these bigger things?
So they approached me to put a tender in for this job. These kind of council projects, they release, they'll release like a job tender to take on these jobs, and I was invited to apply for that, and I was very fortunate to win that tender. So how exactly they've heard of me, whether it's been through social media, whether it's been word of mouth, I'm not entirely sure, but certainly I think all aspects help. Do you know?
Right.
Gives that social proof, doesn't it?
Yeah. I've never actually got round to making a website yet, believe it or not.
You've obviously not needed to.
Social media just kicked off so well for me that I've not needed to yet, and it's something that's number one on my to-do list, but I haven't yet. So I'm it blows me away that I'm able to get jobs like this without that. Do you know what I mean? Which is brilliant.
But even a simple landing page website would be.
I know.
That's all it needs to be, right?
I know.
Because this isn't kind of the thing that you just go on and hit buy now.
Yeah.
You need to have that interaction.
I've got the hosting, I've got the address. It's just a case of doing
the last bit.
The last bit of putting a picture on it. That's all I need, a picture.
And you've got hundreds of them apparently, years of content. Exactly. You've just not put it together.
I know. It seems too easy to be like, I'll get round to it.
Yeah, you get absorbed, certainly for myself, I get absorbed in the enjoyment of the job. I get lost in the process of it. And then when you finish it, you get that overwhelming sense of enjoyment that I don't think you can get from any other job like you can from being a maker, do you know?
Yeah.
Then the next job comes in, you're focused on that. And as long as you've got that coming in, do you need all these extra things? Do you know? It helps, definitely helps, but it's not essential. Which is
and I think it's very easy to, and we've fallen foul of this, to be chasing the next thing and actually forget to enjoy the thing that's happening right here, right now, right in front of you.
Absolutely.
And that's something we've done, certainly me.
Yeah.
I really had to concentrate on. Like enjoy. What is it? Was it Jimmy Carr? Joy it's enjoying the passage of time. Like being able to sit and enjoy that, especially when you're carving, man. Like it must be brilliant. And if you were thinking about chasing that next thing, at what point is it just too much weight on your shoulders?
Exactly, man. It's certainly, as a bit, the business aspect comes into it, and you've got to have that sensible head. But at the end of the day, you've strived to make that career out of something you love, and you just want to enjoy every second of that. You know? And there's points when you're working where nothing else matters. You're just totally zoned in, that flow state, which is incredible. It's an amazing feeling to have. And I certainly love that feeling. Do you know, it's you strive for it every day. And it can be easy to forget about the other important things you need to do. Do you know? Answering those emails or chasing this up, chasing that up. But it's something very unique to being a maker, I think.
I think so.
100%.
So timescale wise, whether it's like the bear or and for anyone watching this and not just listening on audio, the big sculpture behind us. But you also then talked about like there's speed carvings where it'll be a 30-minute or 4-hour. Like what is a typical?
If there is one.
How long's a piece of string question? What's the sort of typical time scale in this? Like I just can't. Because I know chainsaws enough and I know how chainsaws work, you think chainsaw fast acting, rip loads of wood out, but then you see detail on this, I can't make that bridge.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a vast array of like time, like you could do, I can do a simple owl in half an hour. There's guys that could probably do them in 10 minutes.
Oh really? As fast as that?
Really quick.
Wow.
I mean, your only limit is how fast the saw can move through the wood. Do you know? There are guys that will do a very simplified but very effective cut version of an animal very quickly. I like to take my time, and if I'm doing a stock owl, it might take me half an hour, whereas it might take someone else 10 minutes. And you're that's the only limit, is where your ability to stop comes in. Do you know? Like that little bear there is probably about 2.5, 3 hours work. Yeah. But really? I could take that to 7 or 8. Do you know? It totally depends.
That's 2.5 to 3 hours what?
2.5 to 3 hours.
I'd have put that in a day and a half.
I mean, by the time it's all finished, it'll...
Didn't buy wood carvings off me because you're going to get overcharged.
but by the time it's finished, it'll probably be beyond that. But it's the cutting time, and then you factor in the wood drying time, the finishing time.
Yeah, right.
The time it takes to slap some kind of oil, etc. on it.
But that's all time you can be doing something else, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But then you get large pieces like this, and I mean, with the size of saws that we can work with, something like that, you could get the simple shapes out very quickly. But then the time it takes to add in the details, like these foxgloves, the little holes, the textures that make up your shape language, that's what takes the time. And it also takes a lot of analysis as you're working with it as well. So that makes
just like what we were saying off camera, like, you know, when do you stop? When do you know when to stop? Because I'm bad for just keep going and going and going. You just need to be like, no, it's as good as it is. No one's going to maybe notice all these little extra things that...
That's exactly it.
But that's your business head, like, I don't need to do anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you get oil painters that... like, we'll start a painting, and then as soon as they'll get to a point of nearly finishing it, and they'll be like, actually, I want to change this, and they'll go back and completely change that bit. And that can be an endless loop, unless you know when to be like, right, okay, let's set this as done, do you know? And wood carving's the same, although it's reductive, and you'll get to a point where you can't change that shape much more. You can still, I might get to a point in some carvings where I've done this, I've finished all the detail, and then I'm like, the shape's not sitting right with me, I'm going to change that now. Do you know? It's, yeah.
And is it something that's changeable?
I mean, your only limitation with wood is the time you're willing to put into it. You could cut a bit off, glue another bit on, you know? You can think outside the timber itself like that. So that becomes your limiting factor. I could certainly get lost for days in something that could take me a couple of hours, do you know? It just depends on the subject and how I feel at that given point in time.
What's been your most favourite piece?
I really love historical subjects, in particular historical figures. So I did a couple of Romans over the last couple of years, and I love doing stuff like that. I love, that kind of period of history has always interested me. So whenever I get to work in human form, specifically historic human form like that, it's really interesting. It brings out my big kid. The big kid comes out.
It doesn't feel like that's synonymous with wood carving though. Like dogs, bears on the front porch, that kind of thing synonymous with wood carving. I don't see many, like, I would always think of more stone sculptures when I was thinking of Romans or people or...
Yeah, it's a lot of, like if you go around like a historic site, certainly like, you know, like Stirling Castle, there's a lot of stuff that's made of fiberglass. And it's easier to get a more realistic form that way because they can work in clay, make a mould of it, and then, you know, a fiberglass piece comes out. And it's only really chainsaw carving that you can get wood down in a cost-effective, quick way that public art can be bought like that. Do you know? And certainly guys like myself that have spent a lot of time studying drawing, you can whittle out a human form pretty quickly in a dynamic pose, add the details, and it's still appealing to a kind of wide audience, do you know?
They can appreciate it,
Yeah, exactly. I think the wood aspect of the piece becomes appealing in itself as well, do you know? It's something that's nice to look at, and you can appreciate like the grain, the finish of it.
Appreciate the skill in it.
And the skill, yeah. I've never met a wood carver that blows their own horn too much, and nobody will go out and say like, oh, I'm super skilled at what I do, do you know? We're all quite humble people, most makers are. It's just the nature of the personality type, I think. But there is some incredible work out there, incredible work, and I'm always inspired by the work of my peers and even different crafts, do you know? It's very easy to draw inspiration.
Do you take a lot of that from different crafts?
Absolutely, yeah. I certainly like a surface finish. I might see a furniture maker or a bowl turner with a certain finish, and I'm like, how did they get that, and how can I work this into the next thing that I'm working on? Do you know, like the lion behind you there? It's got quite a kind of dappled, sanded texture, and that was something I'd seen on a bowl turner, and I just thought that will look cool on one of my sculptures if it's finished in that way. Do you know? So
it's quite interesting that pulling stuff from, because it really goes to show that sort of web of makers and how all different things can be pulled from others.
Yeah.
You know, one of the girls that posted last night on our thread was plates, but it wasn't a glaze she'd used under it. She'd painted the base of it and then glazed it. And there was just something about, exactly like you described there with the lion, something about that surface finish that was just...
You don't see it very often.
You don't see it often. You see it on an art piece, not on a plate.
Yeah.
And like you say there, you see that finish on a bowl, not on a sculpted lion.
Yeah.
Not that you see many sculpted lions. But
I mean, there's so much out there to draw inspiration from, and I think the only limiting factor is how much you look at or what you've seen before. And I think if you're willing to and open to taking inspiration from as many things as possible, then there isn't really a limit, you know, and you can make things look super innovative, and you can push your art to places it's never been before as well, do you know?
So if there's somebody here that's in the same position, listening to this, that's in the same position as you, artistic, didn't know how to fulfill it, that wants to pick this up, how did they go about getting started on something like this?
I mean, I never set out to be a chainsaw carver, and this is the most interesting thing. I was just always open to trying something new, you know? Like, when I found the opportunity to try carving, I gave it a try. I wasn't happy with it, and I stuck with it, and before you know it, you found something you really enjoy, and you can really push that forward. And I think that's, as a creative, you can never be too tied down to a specific avenue to go in. Yeah. You've got to be able to adapt that to something new, and to improvise what you've already done to suit what you've got in front of you. Yeah. So that's what creativity is, really, isn't it? It's taking what you've got around you already and using that in a way that suits your kind of methodology or your direction where you want to go. Yep. I think I made up a word there, methodology.
Methodology.
I'm having it.
Yeah.
Spot the Ouija.
I make up words all the time, and our proofreader's like, that's not a word, mate. That's not a
So
word.
that's why we've got you.
She's doing she's getting edition 10 ready, and I'd sent her a text the other night, and she's like, that's definitely not a word, but we can use this word instead. I was like, cool.
No, she said it was a word, it's just not the right context.
Is that what it was?
Yes.
Right. Or she'd said a word or something, and I was completely unaware that it was a word.
Well.
Whatever it was, I do it all the time, man. Like,
You got grammar for dummies the other day.
I got called out from a newsletter for having a couple of bits of bad. I've not got breaking news. I've not even got like a standard grade in English or anything like that. And got called out on my newsletter for missing an apostrophe somewhere. That's what it was. I got you're and you are, like you're and you're wrong.
Aye.
And so I got called out, and I had to go and buy Grammar for Dummies and read that.
Well, you learnt from it. That's the main thing, mate. That's the main thing.
That's what it's all about. It's a journey, isn't it?
Thing is, at least you know there's human behind it. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Humans make errors, and I think that's something as society that we've become a bit scared of, is making errors. And certainly for myself, at one point in life I was petrified of it. But you've just got to do it. You've got to have that confidence to think, well, yeah, I've made a mistake. Oh well,
always
get on with it. Yeah, yes. As long as you learn from it, that's the important thing.
It doesn't feel like you could be here without having done that.
No, and I mean, certainly inwardly it doesn't feel like that. It feels like that's something I still struggle with, but then you look at everything and you're like, well, I've got somewhere, so I must be doing something all right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you think this is it now? Do you think this is where you are creatively for?
I mean, I wouldn't close down avenues if things change. Do you know, if something else piques my interest in years to come, then I would do that. But I love wood. I love working wood with a saw. It's so fast. It's so you're able to express your thoughts so well in wood with a chainsaw. Very direct. very quick. There's no, like, you're not waiting for paint to dry until you're finishing it, of course, then you are. But when you're actually sculpting, it's very quick, it's very hard. You know, you're not careful of damaging it like you would with a clay piece. And that's something I really enjoy. But again, you don't know what the market's going to be like in 10 years' time. You know, is it going to go out of fashion? So you just got to keep your options open, really.
It's very true. I don't see it going out in fashion. You never know, do you?
Yeah, and if it does go out of fashion, it would come back, wouldn't it? Everything goes in cycles.
Yeah, I think wood in particular is something that's bound to the human psyche. You know, I think like we've always had a very close connection to trees, to the forest, to working with wood, and I think that you have an inherent liking to anything made of wood as well.
Yeah.
I've never met anyone that hates wood.
Yeah, it's true.
Or hates a wooden product. And I think that's
a very good point.
Yeah.
You never meet anyone that's like, oh, I hate a wooden dining table, or I hate a wooden chair.
Look at that grain, it's disgusting.
I know, you didn't get it, do you?
Nah.
You didn't get it. It's a very good point.
I just think it speaks to you. It does. The grain of a beautiful bit of wood just speaks to you in a way that nothing else does. You know?
It's also one of the few materials that imperfections aren't looked at as imperfections.
It's true.
Like
Because it is what it is.
If you see like a steel side cabinet that's got a little warp in it, you'd flip. You'd be like, that's an engineered product, it should be flat.
Yeah.
Whereas our dining table's an old oak dining table and it's up and down like a fiddler's elbow. But you're like, this is mint. This is what it's meant to be.
It's the imperfections become their own entity in wood, and something natural like that. You know, you start to enjoy the naturalness of the product as opposed to something machine finished. And not that there's anything wrong with that either. That can have its own context of beauty. Certainly in something simplistic. I love seeing something that's really, really symmetrical and well finished.
Which is quite interesting in itself, because wood can exist in both sides. Like, you can get that beautifully finished furniture, and you can get, you know, a dining table more like ours that's more like a farmhouse style dining table, and they're both still amazing. Like, absolutely amazing. I think Timberwolf out in Adelaide, I think of his tables, and they're just like, you could run a level off them. They're perfect, and they're such a beautifully engineered piece. But they're still the same material as it's wild,
There's certainly like styles of chainsaw carving where people will do like a very, very choppy, almost like a pencil sketch but in wood, so nothing's refined but they've got just enough for it to look really natural, and it's got such a powerful look to it. I've tried it and I just can't. You know, it's just not something that comes naturally to me. But I love looking at it when I see other people doing it. It just looks incredible. And it's almost like your mind sees the things that aren't there. Do you know what I mean? And it pulls it together in this really beautiful way. I'm like, would that be possible if it was done in clay? If it was done in styrofoam? If it was done in metal? God, it would be really hard to do in metal. But you know, there's something about the wood that enables that effect. That's, I just love that.
Do you ever include any other materials in your wood? In your sculptures?
Not really. No, I try to keep it all wood. I think it looks better that way. Certainly I've tried incorporating different types of wood in the same sculpture. I think that if it's a dark wood and a light wood together, or a redwood, like say like redwood or western red cedar with a really white wood, that can work well. But no, I've never tried. There's guys that will use epoxy in wood, and that looks brilliant. But for an outdoor piece, I don't know if it would last the weather too well. So it's
you wouldn't know until further down the line anyway.
That's the problem. It's not something, you don't want to bang 10 or 20 of them out for a customer and then find out in a few years' time all 10 or 20 of them have gone, you know?
Exactly.
It's all along, especially here. Especially Scotland, and it's... The weather, that's another podcast in itself.
I know.
It's actually spring at the minute.
I can't believe it's not raining today.
I know.
It's rained almost non-stop since September.
It's 13 months of rain, isn't it? A year. It's unbelievable, man.
I don't think we even get snow this year.
No.
It was just non-stop rain.
Just rain and wind and
Come to Scotland.
This is the tourist board will ask us to take this down. Look at that.
My American friends came over in May last year and took them on a tour of Scotland for like a few days, and they're like, I don't know what you complain about, like it's been beautiful, and I'm like, this is the only 3 days it's going to be sunny all year, and right enough it was. It's incredible.
You can never plan for when that's coming, you know.
No, you can't.
It's an absolute nightmare. And so tell me, this is where we are now. What's next? I mean, that seems like a pretty big step for you with regards to size of sculpture. Is this one of the biggest ones you've done?
Yeah, this is certainly. This is certainly the biggest kind of public piece I've done so far, and the next one's actually going to be slightly bigger in a different way, not as detailed, but slightly bigger. And this is kind of like where I've been edging towards being. I did a 12-foot elephant a few years ago for a private client, and that was a massive challenge. I'd never done joinery before, and it was joined out of 32 large beams. But that was a massive learning curve that really I took on a bit too early, do you know? But ever since then, I was like, I really want to do large scale pieces. I really enjoyed it. I liked getting stuck into it. I liked the learning process, the trial and error of it. And it feels like that's culminated in doing something like this. So hopefully I get more large projects like this. But also, I've found a new love for doing the smaller pieces as well. Pieces that I can take to shops and galleries and things like that. Do you know?
Cool.
They're easy to move about, easy to pick up and move. I've actually got a garden machinery shop in Queensburn next to Kilsyth called Burnside Garden Machinery, and they're going to be stocking some of my smaller pieces going forward.
See, that's cool.
It's
and
nice.
are they like lawn ornament style stuff?
Just stuff that someone could pick up and put in their garden, put up in their conservatory, things like that, do you know?
And do you mark your pieces from like a brand or?
I should.
Yeah,
I really should.
Yeah, you should.
I want to get one of these metal brands. I've seen them going about, and that'd be a really cool way to put your logo and stuff. Some guys sign their initials with a saw. And that's not something. I've got really bad handwriting. Like, I can barely write. It's so bad. I used to be quite neat, but I don't know if it's using the saws or
no
what.
one writes anymore, to be fair.
No.
It's all on the computer.
It's literally like a scribble now. It's terrible.
That's yours. It's just. I don't even
Mine's just perfect. Thank you very much.
I mean, like I can draw like a portrait to a decent standard, but I can barely write my name in a legible manner. I don't know what.
I have to write in block capitals. So it's completely illegible. Completely illegible.
It's like graffiti writing.
Everything has to be block capitals for me, or it's not legible at all. But that's where we get to.
Yeah, true.
So next we're going to try and get some big stuff. Does that tend to be more like this, like local authority, tender work?
Yeah, I actually planning to do, we were talking about doing stuff that, like personal works. And that's something that I'm planning to do as well, but larger scale personal works. And obviously that's something that has to be time managed carefully because it's a bit of an investment until it sells. But it's something that I feel ready to do, and it's something that I'm going to be pushing more as time goes forward as well, because I think it's an important avenue for creating interest in your business, creating a bit of impact in social media, etc., and also for stretching your muscles for your abilities. Do you know? I think you learn more on the pieces that really, really challenge you and push you out your comfort zone. So,
good for you.
What's the dream piece?
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, historic battle scene.
Full booner.
Full booner, like 5 or 6 figures all interacting.
Nice.
Something that would take up a large space. Something dynamic. I've had an idea in my head for a while. I don't know if it's a good idea to talk about your ideas until you've done them, is it?
I put them out there because if I don't, I'll never do them.
A forest, right? So imagine you're in a forest. You walk into this forest and above you is like a 20-foot goldfish dangling from a tree, looking down at you, right? Something like that, like an immersive park made of wood sculptures, but like something out the box, something that looks impractical or impossible. Something
that catches attention.
Something like that. Any millionaires out there that feel that they want to do that, then they can get in contact with me.
Yeah, links in the bottom of the description.
Here I am. No.
That'd be wicked. Just do something completely out the box.
I think like, is it art parks through near Edinburgh? It's like kind of sculpture park.
Jupiter Artland.
That's it, Jupiter Artland. I keep meaning to go. I've seen pictures of it.
It's cool, man. It's pretty trippy. Like
I could see your stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, I could see you doing something like that there.
Something like that. Something that touches on that would be the dream. And that certainly pulls out the creative aspect in your head a lot more than just doing the standard sellable pieces, do you know?
Yeah.
And any artist wants to be doing things like that, really.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Kate?
Yeah, last question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Believe in yourself, and if you struggle with believing yourself, just do it anyway. I think that's the thing that's held me back the most in life, was not having the self-esteem to do a certain thing. And then as you get older, I'm sure you guys will have experienced this yourself, you think that, well, that thing I was scared of or that held me back from doing this, it didn't happen, or if it did, it wasn't that bad, so just go for it, do you know? I think that's...
We're very good at ruminating on the worst thing that could happen, eh?
Exactly.
And not thinking what could come out of that.
What was it Bill and Shannon said to us? Everyone that's just heard me say those words on the podcast is like, can you stop talking about this?
They're good.
They are good words. What is the cost of not doing it?
Exactly. It's the cost of not doing something that you want to do is far greater than the cost of failing at it, I think. Failure's like something we've become scared of. Certainly our generation can be quite scared of failure. For some reason. Why? I don't know. Because
I think we all think everything's so public.
It is.
Probably because of social media and because we all build our brands on social media. Like,
no one really talks about it.
Failure is public.
Yeah, no one really talks about it either, because you want to be seen to be doing good all the time, but that's not reality, is it?
No.
Sometimes.
What I think the counter to that is failure is public, but so is trying. Like if you're stagnating, that's also public.
Yeah.
If you're constantly pushing forward, I would far rather be remembered as someone that constantly pushed forward.
Absolutely, you've got to. You've got to keep doing things. You've got to do the things that scare you, and the things that the things that are limiting you. You've got to try and stop doing, and you've got to push yourself forward in ways that, you know, they might feel uncomfortable. Certainly, like talking like this in front of a camera is difficult to do, but you've got to do it to move forward. Do you know what I mean? It's a way of elevating yourself.
Hopefully it wasn't as bad as you thought it was.
It wasn't. No, you guys have made us comfortable. I appreciate that.
2 people in a row have said that, Kate.
Yeah, but you just want it to be a conversation. It doesn't have to be like question. Like some people say, "Can you give me some questions so I can think about them?" Like, but that's not how a conversation normally goes.
No, it's not. And I appreciate the way you guys have done it, because if I was trying to remember things that I'd written on a question and answer sheet, I would be like,
no, I wouldn't remember either.
I can't do that. I've watched a lot of your podcasts and things, and I was like, how do I make myself sound as interesting as all these guys that
but you're just sounding just as interesting.
You'll sound just as interesting. It'll be great. We changed tack. This is the second podcast. We obviously always used to answer or ask the first question, like, who is James Elliott? And we've changed tack to just going straight into the conversation, and I'll go back and record an intro just before we leave. To be like, we're here with James Elliott. And one of the reasons for that is most makers were great with it. They would just jump straight into it. But there was certainly a few of them, and I would never exclude the few because of the many, that isn't the best start and answer. I'd rather just like to you, like, so you were an arboriculturist, right? And then like conversation flows from there, right?
Yeah, I mean, you warm into I certainly warm into a conversation, do you know what I mean? You go in and you're kind of in your head to start with, and then as you get on with that, you start to free up a bit. And I think that's a good way to do it.
And that's the best conversations, when you feel most relaxed.
Yeah.
It's like just talking to your pal in the pub, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's all a podcast should be, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Some of the best podcasts I listen to are just conversations, and they do a very, very good job of them just being conversations. Ace.
Well, thanks very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank
it was
you
wicked
guys.
to see it. It was wicked to make it all happen in the calendar and see it all happen and hear a bit about your story.
Aye, it's in the the void of chaos, as I call it.
Aye. Hey, we never had rain battering off the roof all day, so
I know. Do you know? I was literally like, the chances are you will come here, it'll be blowing a gale, so that door will be like bashing off the hinges. The rain will be pelting off the roof, and you just won't hear a thing.
The good thing about this, it's this kit that we've got kind of usually quietens all that out.
The Nomono cuts a lot of it out. It's really handy.
But to not have it is a pleasure.
It's even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.